was with a friend in Australia living on a farm. I was a monk at the time, and I was developing the local Food for Life project, as well as writing an international newsletter to help expand Food for Life around the world. So I became like the voice for Food for Life because I understood its potential as a transformative organization, that this is amazing power. This can do all sorts of wonderful things in the world, not just fill bellies.
What is up, Impact Heroes? Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Rick Ornelas. Thank you for spending some time with us today because we know time's a valuable resource and we're going to make it worth your while. I appreciate each and every one of you, not just for listening, but for who you are. I know you're sparking change to make the world a better place every day, and I am humbled and grateful for your efforts. It takes all of us doing our part to spread positive change, and that's what this show is all about. Motivating you with stories of struggle, courage, and hope to empower you to make a difference in your life and the lives of others.
Are you interested in having Rick speak at your event or business? Here is what others have to say.
Did not know his story, and it was so inspirational, and his presence on stage, his authenticity was just incredible.
Absolutely loved his performance. It made me feel some type of way.
If you're looking for a speaker for your next event, hire Rick. I promise you this, you will not be disappointed.
Visit rickornelas.com to book him today.
Welcome back, Impact Heroes. Today we have the pleasure of speaking to our latest iSpark Change social impact hero, and he is a good one. Our guest is a vegan social entrepreneur who's driven, passionate, and has devoted himself to making the world a better place. He promotes peace and stability, advocacy, practice, and has over 35 years of experience in food security, food and nutrition, world hunger, and the nonprofit sector. That's a lot of experience. At the age of 19, he became a monk and spent 14 years in the Vaishnava tradition. In his volunteer work, he's visited over 73 countries, conducted training seminars in 35 regions around the world, and has coordinated numerous disaster relief projects, including the Asian tsunami in 2004, Hurricane Katrina in 2005, and the Japan tsunami in 2011. He's a published author of 6 books, including Food Yoga, The 5 Noble Truths, and How to Build a Successful Food Relief, among others. His charity services include free schools, orphanages, eco-communities, medical care, animal sanctuaries, and large-scale food distribution kitchens that serve over, get this, 2 million freshly cooked meals daily in 60 countries. Incredible. So please welcome the biggest social impact hero I can honestly say I've ever had on the show, the authentic and generous founder of Food for Life, Paul Rodney Turner. Paul, welcome to the iSpark Change podcast.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it, Rick.
Yeah, it's as I told you off air, I was really excited about this interview, and for good reason, right? Because to hear your story and to hear your background, and just some of those things. I think it's important for our listeners to as I was saying off air, to not get not feel that they can't make a difference, from where they are, because if you read your bio, you've done a lot, right? You've done a lot of things, and you've impacted so many lives across the world. And I guess that, the first question that I have for you, Paul, is what got you on that path? What got you on the path to wanting to impact the world, or just to wanting to have impact, to wanting to create social impact? What got you on that path?
Well, looking back, I was certainly just your average Aussie kid. I grew up in the western suburbs of Sydney, playing football, chasing girls, getting into fights, all sorts of things. But at the same time, I was also very interested in intellectual topics. I was very philosophical. So I was the one that was like the thoughtful one, asking questions, thinking about things, wondering how things work, that sort of thing. To the point where at the age of 15, I became an amateur astronomer, and I would sit up all night with my best friend, and we would just look at the stars and study them, and look for meteor showers and UFOs. And that experience planted a seed in my heart to ask the big questions about life, which is, what is this all about? Who are we? What's the purpose of life? So that was at the age of 15. So that seed sort of sprouted a few years later when I was introduced to the philosophical teachings of India, when I learned about reincarnation and karma and things like that, which led me to making the really radical choice to become a monk at the age of 19. So at 19 until 33, I practiced a very strict celibate lifestyle as a monk. And I pursued those answers, wondering, what is the purpose of life? Why are we here? Who is God? What is God? Those sort of things. Why are we given different sort of situations? Why is one person lucky, another person's unlucky? Why do apparently innocent people die young? And these questions can be answered if one has the patience and the humility to approach them with the right mindset. So that led me on a path to my first service as a monk was actually preparing food in the temple kitchen and going into Sydney and feeding the hungry, feeding homeless people. So that was literally my first service. And interestingly enough, before I became a monk, made the choice, I had this idea that I would become a cook for God. For some reason, I had this idea that I would be a cook. And I was not trained in cooking or anything, but I just had this attachment to food and preparing food. And I realized that food is not simply something that we eat. It can be an art form. It can be a way that we can express ourselves. And you ask any celebrated chef, and they'll have their signature spice, their signature way of doing things, cooking technique, or so on. And that's where you have the artistic side of food, how it's displayed. So there's the artistic side and there's the scientific side of food, where certain things go together and certain things don't go together. Mm-hmm. And then there's a more subtle aspect of food, where what you think and the intentions and the feelings that you bring into that experience are one of the ingredients that goes into the meal. And this is what I picked up when I was a monk. And one of the ways that I picked that up was the tradition that we followed in the temple was that you would not taste the food while you prepared it. This food was an offering. It was a gift. So just like, for example, if you brought your wife or your girlfriend a box of chocolates, you would dare not take one of the chocolates out and taste it just to make sure it was the right type of chocolate or the right taste. You would not touch that chocolate.
Yeah, unless you're Forrest Gump, of course, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a gift. It's something that you give. It's given without any lust and selflessly. So when we prepare food as monks, when we prepared the meal, we wouldn't even taste the meal. And we would sometimes cook for hundreds, 500, 1,000 people at a time, and we would not taste the meal, not taste the food while we were preparing it. And it was only at the end, when the food was finished, then we took a sample of that food, put it on a silver platter, and said a prayer and made an offering to God, and then we would serve it to the public. Wow. And the idea was that food was charged with pure intention, a very selfless sort of attitude. This is a gift for you. I love you. You're my friend. You're my brother. You're my sister. So that was a very important lesson that I learned in that experience, that food is the great communicator. It has the ability to break through all language barriers. It can unite the world. And so that became the flavor, the narrative, the mission for what then became Food for Life Global, an international network of vegan food relief charities providing freshly cooked vegan meals to over 1.5 million people every single day.
Yeah, it's incredible to hear you explain that, because I had heard you say, and a question I wanted to ask, and you just basically answered it, was that food can be a unifying factor that can unite the world. And from my perspective, right, I not being in the work that you're in, I didn't understand it. I said, okay, I understand how you can unite people at a meal, right? You sit down and you have a nice meal with your family or your friends, or, you know, in a big setting with a big group. And I was just at this event, an event last weekend, and there was one point, so we had about 35 people there, and we all sat down at one long table, right? And had a meal. And as I heard, as I was thinking about what you're saying, I was thinking, well, we weren't super unified, because even at that big long table, we only got to interact with the people that were kind of right around us, right? We couldn't talk to the people over there. You know, we took a picture of the table and all that, but I was thinking, how can food really unify everyone? And hearing you explain it, it makes complete sense. That shifts explanation.
Yeah, it shifts consciousness, and that's the thing you have to understand, that food is not simply proteins and calories and vitamins and minerals. It has a subtle aspect. There's a subtle nature of food, just like you and I. We're not these physical forms. This is what we use we animate the energy inside, the soul inside is animating this physical form. And if we were to say that, I'm this body, I'm an Australian, I'm an American, I'm a Canadian, then you're really missing the point of who you really are in essence, because you are eternal. You are a spiritual being. You are super powerful. You're qualitatively like God. And you're animating this physical form, expressing yourself through physical form. And we can see this change. We can see how there's a constant there. One time, when our mother looks at us, still to this day, she sees us as her little boy, mm-hmm. or her little girl. Mm-hmm. And so she sees the essence of who we really are. So although our body has changed dramatically, we're still the same person in her eyes. And that's just the truth. And so right now in this particular life we're having, we're actually reincarnating, because our body is changing constantly, but we're the same person. So when we talk about the subtle aspect of food, it is a carrier of intention. So those beautiful feelings, those spiritual feelings, those feelings of love and respect, they are invested in the food when it's prepared in a certain way. And then when people consume that, it shifts their consciousness. So although it's also nourishing their physical form, it's also shifting consciousness. And so that's ultimately what we're trying to achieve, particularly at Food for Life Global, because we believe that the solution to world hunger is not a lack of food. It's not like just producing more food, or it's because of a breakdown in distribution. There's plenty of food, and although they are components of the problem, but there's plenty of food in the world. What's missing is this consciousness that we're all earthlings, this awareness that we're all brothers and sisters. We're all part of the same ecosystem. We're all interdependent. We're meant to serve each other. So once we have that understanding, things like world hunger will disappear overnight, because we wouldn't tolerate our brother or sister going hungry. So food has the ability to create that awareness. When it's prepared with love, served with love, it can shift our consciousness to such a point where we start to see our other people in a more intimate spiritual way. We look beyond the color of their skin, the culture, the race, the politics, and so on. We start to see them in who they are in the essence of being a spiritual being, a spark of God, part and parcel of God. And then that is what will actually shift consciousness and directly address the problems that we're seeing today in the world, poverty and hunger and so on.
Everything you're sharing, Paul, I feel so grateful that I have to just thank you again for coming on the show, because I feel so grateful to have you on the show, because everything that you're talking about, with food as the vehicle, if you will, is the world that I'm working towards as well with iSpark Change and my work and the people that I've connected with. We're all working towards that same goal of making the world a better place. And it's through different vehicles, right? Your vehicle is with food and Food for Life. And I don't think I'm ever going to look at food the same way again after hearing everything you explained, but it makes sense, as I said, because I think about my wife and I, we typically meal prep, and our kids are out of the house now, so it's just us. And we typically will meal prep on a Sunday for the week. And I don't really think of it as putting love into, the food, because it's just me that's going to eat it. However, when, like on the holidays, so for example, Thanksgiving in the United States, I cook everything, and I'll cook everything. And I do put so much love, and I pour my heart and soul into everything. And it's so gratifying and wonderful to see my family and the friends that we have over eating and enjoying it, and the fellowship that we feel. And that, it sounds to me, that is how you look at every meal. That is how you look at everything that you prepare. And that's a beautiful way to look at it.
And you'll notice too, Rick, is that when you have that experience of putting your heart and soul into something as a service to others, you're actually nourished by that experience. Mm-hmm. At the end of when you're serving the meal, you're not really interested in eating the meal. You're just happy to see them eating and them enjoying, because at our essence, just like everything has an innate quality, the innate quality of sugar is sweetness. You can't separate sweetness from sugar. If it's not sweet, it's not sugar. Mm-hmm. The innate quality of fire is heat and light. If you separated heat and light from fire, it's not fire. So there are certain innate qualities which are indistinguishable from the actual phenomena, just like the sunlight and the sun globe. When we say the sunlight is in my room, it's not actually the sun globe, it's the sunlight, but they're sort of indistinguishable. They're one and the same. They're one, but they're also different. Mm-hmm. So in the same way, we, in essence, are servants. We like to serve. That's the innate quality of the soul, is that we actually enjoy to serve, and we get more nourishment and more satisfaction in serving. When we give a gift to someone, we're actually happier in giving than in receiving a gift. That's just our innate quality.
Yeah, and you didn't realize it. You didn't realize it, Paul, but you touched on my purpose in life. So my purpose is to love and to give and to serve. Those three things. And I for years I wore a bracelet, and then just last month I happened to be in Israel, and my wife convinced me to get a tattoo that shows that, and I have it there with love and give and serve on my wrist. And
Beautiful.
you mentioned all those three components of and what we're called to do and be as human beings, and that's what I feel is my purpose, and for others, obviously, I feel they have to find their own purpose, but I think that's a big part of it. I think love and service of others and giving to others. And see, I knew I would like you. I knew I would enjoy this conversation. So much so. I do want to ask about and I want to take you back to when you were preparing meals, because you said you started out, monk, you were preparing meals. I just have to ask this question, and this may sound funny, but since you're not tasting the food, did you ever get to the point where you prepared a bunch of meal, 100 people or 300 people, and then you taste and you're like, oh, I needed more salt, or I should have done this, or I should have done that?
I did have some horrific experiences, but for 99% of the time, it was perfect. It was because I just had that faith, that trust that it's all going to be good. And it was the right amount of salt, and it was the right amount of sweetness, and it was balanced, and it was really good. So you have to sort of surrender to the process. But there's one interesting experience I had. I was cooking in Latvia at one of the temples in Latvia. And it was a very poor country at that particular time. Latvia is now, Riga is considered to be like the Paris of that part of the world. Anyway, so there was a very poor temple, and they didn't even have hot water in the showers, and they didn't even have a shower head. It was just like a pipe. It was like cold water coming down like a laser beam. So that's how you had your showers as monks. One time I was preparing a meal, and someone had put citric acid where the salt was. And I used citric acid instead of salt in the vegetable curry. Yeah, and I was like, at the end, everyone was so excited to eat it because I was cooking it. I was like the lead monk. And then when they realized, oh my God, it's citric acid, everyone was so disappointed. So
you had to have at least one, right, Paul? You had to have at least one time.
We always have to have one or two failures. So that has happened, but for the most part, it works.
And I would say, you know, when you go into it with that heart of service and faith that, you know, God's going to take care of you, it's going to work out how it's supposed to work out, you know, I guess. And and maybe for that point, you know, everyone was meant to not eat curry that night. I mean, who knows? It reminds me of, so I've read some literature. I think he was in the 1500s. He was a monk, or I think maybe as a friar, Brother Lawrence. Okay. And he talks about, same thing. He worked in the kitchen, and he talks about how he would put everything that he did into, whether it was cooking or washing dishes, that it would be in service to God. And that's the message, I guess, from his writings, you know, that I've read. I mean, there's a beautiful prayer that actually I say every day that I learned from, you know, reading his work. But it reminds me of what you're talking about, you know, what you learned, you know.
Service is everything. I mean, that's the bottom line is if there's one takeaway that people get from the wisdom of their elders, is service will define your life. If you serve with humility, serve with enthusiasm, serve with selflessness, you will die a happy person. You'll be satisfied that, you know, I did my part. I served the community. I served my family. I served my fellow man and women. I served my country, and so on. Ultimately, you know, all of these things relate to serving God, because yes, there is a personality of Godhead. There is a great divine being, but at the same time, God is everywhere and everything, just like the sun globe and the sunlight. Mm-hmm. So, you know, back in the day, people actually worshiped the sun. I mean, solar religions are not uncommon. You can see that theme running through all of the Egyptian you know, theology, that worshiping the sun, because essentially the sun is like a form of God, because you have this powerful phenomena, the sun globe, but you also have the presence of the sunlight everywhere. So God is like everywhere, but he's also, he is also an individual entity. But at the same time, so through that expression of godliness or God's presence, that can also express itself in our fellow man and our fellow women and plants and animals and so on. So when you serve any other living being, it's a form of service to God as well, because you're connecting with the divine, the essence of that thing, in a very pure way.
Yeah, and that's how I see it, and that's how I see it as well, Paul. And I would say I'm going to say that has to be part of the reason why you've had so much success in growing Food for Life, right? Over 8 billion. I mean, you look at your website and it has a counter, and it's just counting, you know, it's 16 meals a second or something.
Yeah, 16 a second.
Yeah, 60 meals a second. That you've had so much success in feeding because you and I guess, you know, the people that are doing this work at Food for Life, they have that same belief. They have that belief that they are, you know, serving God, that they're doing this as they're spreading love, they're making the world a better place. So it's more than just, hey, here's a meal, right, that helps that person for that day. No, they're nourishing their soul at both sides.
And that's the thing, is that's what makes us very different at Food for Life Global. So not only are the meals plant-based, so they're better for the environment, it's better nutritionally, it's better for our health. And that's been proven in so many different, you know, studies around, you know, the benefits of a plant-based diet. But also it's freshly cooked. So typically when you operate at the scale that we operate at, which is, you know, quite a lot of meals every day, at least 1 million meals a day, typically it's prepared, prepackaged food. Mm-hmm. It's like crackers and, you know, dried crackers, peanut butter, snack bar or something. It's something packaged. But in our case, it's freshly cooked food. The rice, the beans are washed that morning. The vegetables are washed and cut. It's prepared that day and served directly that day. So that itself is extraordinary. And then on top of that, we feel so strongly about the idea of what we call food yoga. This is what I was touching upon earlier. Mm-hmm. The idea of not tasting the food. This is a gift. We're doing this as a selfless service to our, you know, humankind. when that food is prepared with that loving intention, it can not only nourish the body, but nourish the soul and the consciousness, the consciousness and the mind at the same time. So it's mind, body, soul nourishment. It's not simply just physical nourishment. So rather than just filling the belly, we're actually helping to really nourish the person on a very intimate spiritual level.
Yeah, and that also did fascinate me about that all meals are fresh, because I've done some volunteer work with Meals on Wheels, just locally, Meals on Wheels, taking meals around, and those are prepared and then they're taken out and you put them in a little cooler or little warming thing to take them out and deliver them. And I was thinking, okay, over 1 million of these per day, all across the world. That's just, and I know in different countries there's different coordinated efforts, right? People that are doing different aspects of it. But it's just so massive, right? And Food for Life at Global has been around for how long?
Well, Food for Life Global started around 94, 95, the original Food for Life Global. But Food for Life has roots dating back to India in the mid-70s. So the actual program was started by some monks in India. And what happened was our spiritual teacher, his name was Prabhupada, and he was at the temple. And typically in India, typically in the villages of India, they eat off what's called banana leaf plates. Mm-hmm. So they get the big banana leaves and they sew them together, and then that is a plate. And so when you finish your meal, you just throw the plate behind the temple, and then the cows eat the banana leaves with the remnants of the food that's on there. So one time there was a feast, and this is back in 74, and he looked out the window and he noticed where the pile of leaf plates were, there were some dogs fighting with children over the scraps of food. And he was like, oh my God, this is not good. We don't want this to happen. Mm-hmm. So immediately he called his senior yogis, and he says, look, we have to start feeding these children. We can't allow them to be fighting with dogs over scraps of food. No one should be hungry within 10 miles of our temple. So that became like the clarion call for what we now know as Food for Life. And so then they started a food relief immediately the next day, started feeding all the villages like regularly, every single day, making sure that no one went hungry. And then a few years later, that spread to Australia, and Australia opened up the first Food for Life soup kitchen around 79, 80. And it was just feeding people in Sydney out the back of the temple. But it was freshly prepared meals and just serving for free all the homeless people. And then that became like the seed or the example that then spread around the world. And we had maybe a dozen projects at the time. And then when I first became a monk in 83, 84, there was about a dozen Food for Life projects. So this is 10 years in. So it just slowly started to, like, the idea of feeding people around the temple became like a big thing. And then in 1993, so 10 years further on, I was asked then to leave Australia to set up the headquarters in the United States to help develop this in a more formal, professional way around the world. And so in 1995, Food for Life Global was established, and we started spreading and training people around the world. And now we have over 200 projects in 65 countries.
So you've seen it grow substantially in your time. And
yeah, I've been doing this.
Part of that.
I've been doing this for 40 years now. So, Food for Life Global, the official headquarters, officially started in 95. And we ended up moving the office to Slovenia for a couple of years. So we actually closed the US office, set up in Europe for a couple of years, and then we brought it back to the US. So if people look online now, they see that Food for Life, the current Food for Life Global, was established in 2018, but that's just the new US office, but it actually has roots going back to 95. Okay. And then, of course, the actual program, the actual feeding people goes back to 74.
Yeah, and for you, I guess it goes all the way back to when you were just working in the kitchen as a monk, as a young.
Yeah, for me, my first service, when I joined the temple in 84, so it's getting close to 40 years, my first service literally was feeding the homeless. So I thought that was serendipitous. Okay, this is meant to be something I need. And I did other services in the temple, but that was the one that I resonated with. And I really ran with it. I says, I'm going to develop this. And I was the one that took that responsibility. For most of all the other monks, it was like, oh, this is a nice thing. But they didn't understand it the way I did. They didn't understand the power of this project to transform lives, to like really shift consciousness, to create this sense of unity in the world. So all that narrative around what Food for Life Global is now is what I developed over the years. And I wrote a book called Food Yoga to explain that. The idea of like using food to connect with each other, to have a more intimate relationship with food. That's what Food Yoga is all about.
Yeah, I haven't read it, but I will. I mean, I practice yoga and meditate, twice a day, and certain things like that are a big part of my life. And so I know, like I said, I won't look at food the same way, and I'll read that, and then I'm sure it'll have an even more enhanced, vision of food and how it plays a role, in society and with people and everything.
It's very important. It's like a lot of people they misunderstand the importance of food in their life. For most people, we're trained to think it's just nutrition. It's just something you fuel your body with. It's much more than that. It is really a way that we can connect with God. It's a powerful way that we can connect with our fellow humans in a very intimate, very, very beautiful way. So that's what Food Yoga is all about. It's like the idea of nourishing the body, mind, and soul, and accelerating your spiritual ascension. Because food, and this is the lesson that I learned from my teacher, the one that I always resonate to, and that is that he said that spiritual life begins with the tongue. I later adjusted that to like translate it to the layperson. And I says spiritual evolution of consciousness begins when we master the tongue, because the tongue has two functions, tasting and vibrating. What you eat and what you speak will have a dramatic impact on your consciousness. So when you speak nonsense, if you speak lies, if you speak negative things, that's going to bring your consciousness down. In the same way, if we eat foods which are invested with violence, that have negative energy attached to them, that's going to suppress our consciousness. It's going to darken our consciousness. But if we eat light foods which are prepared with love, less violence involved, they're more cleaner, high vibration foods, that'll lift our consciousness. So evolution of consciousness begins when we master the tongue. And that's the message that I always want to leave people with. If there's one thing that you hear today, one thing that you remember, just remember that. Evolution of consciousness begins when we master the tongue.
Very wise, very wise. And I know our listeners will appreciate that. And we'll make sure in the show notes that we highlight that in the show notes for everyone, so they pick up that message. Because it's not just, obviously food for you is a big part of it, but it's not. It's also about the words that you speak and the nourishment that comes into your body. And I think it's interesting because I'll share just a little story. So I am also a CrossFit coach. I coach CrossFit. I've done it for 12 years. I coach it as a hobby. I'll coach, one class per week. And I happened to be in class last night, and there was a young man, a teenager, and he hadn't been in class for a long time. And I noticed he had put on quite a bit of weight. And he's 17 years old. And he said, I was at the doctor, and they said I wanted to put me on blood pressure medication at the age of 17 for high blood pressure. And I was like, what's been going on? What's happening? And well, I've just been eating a lot of fast food and stressed out and everything. And so going back to what you were saying, Paul, the food having a much bigger impact than just on his waistline, right? It's bringing him down. It's changing his health. He didn't necessarily seem depressed, but definitely stressed. And I'm sure he's not, and he wasn't happy about that situation. But the food obviously played a big part in, how he got there.
Yeah. The state of your mind has a big impact on your physical attributes, your physical expressions, and so on. Like what you're thinking. The mind can be our best friend or our worst enemy. And this is one of the lessons I learned from what's called the Bhagavad Gita. So it's sort of like the Hindu Bible. And it's the words of Krishna that he spoke to his friend Arjuna, who was a warrior. He was like a very, very highly revered warrior of the time. And so the Bhagavad Gita actually took place, this discussion took place at the onset of a massive world war. And it's sort of appropriate right now with what's happening in the crazy world that we live. There was crazy, political factions, and there was a war, impending war happening. And literally all the soldiers were lined up on this battlefield. And Krishna and Arjuna are in the middle of this battlefield discussing what was just about to take place. And so Arjuna starts asking him questions about life and like, why are we doing this? This is crazy. I don't want to see all this violence and everything. And Krishna took that opportunity to start to preach to him, to start to tell him the spiritual knowledge of how we're not this body, how we're spiritual beings, we're eternal, we can't die, we live on forever. We just simply change shape based on our consciousness, based on our karma and so on. So it was very interesting. So in that book, he says, one of the sort of the gems of that book, he says that the mind can be your friend or your worst enemy. So it's really just a tool that we use. And the mistake that people make, they think that they are the mind. The mind is simply just an energy, a tool that we can use to navigate this material world. And the difference between you and the mind, it can be clearly explained in this example. If you're standing on the edge of a building and you're looking over and you see, wow, we're really high right now, and you're just enjoying the view, the mind may come in and say, oh, wow, I wonder what it would be like if you jumped. I wonder what would happen if you just jumped over. Would you fly? So your mind comes up with these crazy ideas. That's the way the mind operates. It thinks outside the box. It doesn't think logically. But the intelligence will kick in and say, hang on a minute, that's crazy. You're not a bird. You can't fly. If you jump off the building, you're going to die. So there's a subtle difference that one can distinguish in this conversation going on between the mind and the intelligence. The mind comes up with crazy ideas. The intelligence brings in the logic and says, hang on a minute, that's crazy. Just be realistic. So you have these two entities, two energies conversing. But what's interesting to note here is that you are the witness of that conversation. You, the soul, are witnessing that conversation. So there's another subtle aspect which you have to recognize, and that's you as the spirit within, the real essence, the real animator of physical form, and the intelligence and the mind are simply tools that we use to navigate this material journey.
Yeah, that's all. It's very deep, and it definitely causes you to think. It definitely causes you to think about, where your thoughts are coming from, why you're thinking about what you're thinking about, and, and so much. Well, I want to honor you best, and I want to honor the show as well. So I do think it's important to talk about social entrepreneurship as well, because with iSpark Change, we're about social impact, and a lot of our listeners, they are entrepreneurs. They are interested in making a difference, making the world a better place, as you are, right, on different scales, as we talked about. But discuss, if you will, your definition of social entrepreneurship, and where did that passion come from, or that drive for social entrepreneurship come for you?
Well, it came, the fact that I was a monk for so long. I was a monk from 19 to 33. So it was the very formative years of any man or woman's life is from 19 to 33. It's like whatever you focus on at that particular time in your life, that is going to have make a long-lasting impression on the rest of your life. So for me, it was punctuated by the fact that as a monk, I'm simply just serving all the time. Mm-hmm. I'm not honoring myself. I'm not praising myself. I'm always taking a humble position. I'm serving. I'm not enjoying my senses. I'm very, very much restricting my sensual enjoyment. And to the fact that I was a celibate for 14 years. I was sleeping on a floor. I never had a bed. I never even had a pillow. I would take cool showers. So it was sort of like the spiritual military in a sense. Yeah. So during that time, those formative years, that created this sense of service and the importance of living with purpose and not simply living for sense gratification. That's not really the purpose of life. Yes, you can enjoy your senses and you have a right to do that. But at the end of the day, if you don't live with purpose, if your life is not driven by a purpose to make the world a better place, to make someone's life better, then you'll never, ever be satisfied. So as a result of that, even when I stopped being a monk and I got married and had a family and so on, and did all the things that any regular man would do, I still worked on developing Food for Life. Food for Life was always like my navigation. So even though I worked for the World Bank for 10 years, I trained myself in web development and coding and graphic design. All of these skills I actually learned as a monk, which is another interesting fact. I wasn't your average monk.
No.
So while I was a monk, I was actually training myself in these skills to help me do better service for the charity. And then I got married and I thought, okay, let me take these skills and use it to make money now because I need to, serve my family. But all throughout this time, Food for Life was like my North Star. So whatever I did was always, I had to be helping Food for Life continue to progress. And as a result of that, any other enterprise that I developed along the way, it always had to be done with a purpose. There had to be some positive impact that it would create. It wasn't just about making money, although of course that's important, but it had to have a positive impact. So I started many social enterprises. One was called Guarantee, which was sort of a play on words in the sense because most people know Om as a spiritual sound vibration of Hinduism, and it actually is it's a spiritual representation of the sound of God, Om. But in this case, it was an acronym, and it stood for Output Measurable Guarantee. So it was an output measurable guarantee of social good. So Om Guarantee certification was certifying social good, measurable social good on the blockchain. So I developed that service and started signing up companies that wanted to give back in a measurable way, and they would get certified for it. And then that led into another project which started a couple of years ago called the Kindly Ecosystem. And we launched the Kindly Coin. And the whole purpose of the Kindly Ecosystem is to build a social impact engine on the blockchain to enable anyone, any company, any individual to create measurable social impact instantly as they're going about their daily business. When they swipe their card, when they buy something from a shop, instantaneously there's a measurable social impact attached to that transaction. And that's captured on the blockchain in a very transparent way. People can see, the actual impact in real time. And so they can feel satisfied that even though they're buying a shirt for themselves or something else, at the same time, they're making a positive impact, planting a tree, helping a rescued animal, feeding a child, giving a child a book, or so on, whatever, social impact we're addressing.
Yeah, that just speaks to the scope of impact that you're having, that it's not just through Food for Life Global, but you're looking for other ways. And I think that, under the definition of social entrepreneurship, you look on Google, it should have your picture right there in terms of a good example of someone that is doing it right. Because there's a lot of, that term kind of gets thrown around, and there's people that, they may claim, oh, I'm trying to, be a social entrepreneur, and maybe they're not in it for the right reasons. But there is a sense, you've probably heard of the concept of greenwashing, right? I think most people are aware of that, where companies will claim to be, doing good, and they're buying carbon credits, and essentially they're just greenwashing. They're just like pretending that they're doing good, but they're really not doing anything. They're just, offsetting some income to pretend that they're doing good, but actually what really happens in the real world is another thing. Where is the actual measurable impact? That's how many trees were planted. Yeah. You said you offset all this carbon. Okay, great. But how many kids got a meal? How many, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So it's important that there's a measurable social impact, that you can actually see what actually happened. We're just about to launch, Food for Life Global is just about to launch a range of snack bars
called Impact Bars. And our plan is the actual name of the bar, there are 3 flavors. One bar is called Plant a Tree. So when you buy that bar, it will actually plant a tree. Like one tree will be planted. So it's right in your face. It's not a subtle thing on the back of the packet. It's like Plant a Tree is the name of the bar. Another one's called Save a Child. So when you buy that, a child in need will get a freshly prepared vegan meal through Food for Life Global. And another one is Help an Animal. And so when you buy that, you'll actually provide support and care for a rescued animal at Juliana's Animal Sanctuary. So it's all about measurability. And then when you add the blockchain aspect, then you have transparency. So it's really beautiful. You can actually see, you can track the social impact all from beginning to end. And that's the whole purpose of the Kindly ecosystem, to allow people to track it from the beginning to the end so they see it actually took place. Something really did happen.
Yeah, I love every aspect about what you're doing there, because it's not, with social impact, at least in my short time working in the space, I've seen that a lot of companies, like you were saying, like the greenwashing, they just do it to kind of check a box and show, oh, look, we're an impactful company, or it's like DE&I, oh, look, we have, diversity, equity, inclusion, when they're not really doing anything behind it. And it's starting to evolve, and it started in 2020. That was like a big push in 2020, and from what I've seen, and now it's growing more in the right direction. And so I love, the things that you're creating and doing, and those bars are not only are they incredible and what they'll do, but it's brilliant marketing. Have to say, with someone with a marketing background, that is brilliant marketing. I'd be very curious to see which bar sells the most. And I think you'll sell a lot of all of them, because there's so many animal lovers, and there's, so many people that want to help children, and so many people want to clean up the environment, But I'd be very curious. We'll have to touch base, and you let me know which.
We'll talk about it, because the idea is I'm starting as a division of Food for Life, and it's called Impact Foods, and so we're planning to bring out a Colombian coffee as well. And so when you buy this Colombian coffee, organic Colombian coffee, the profit margin will be enough that we'll be able to feed about 20 children. So with the snack bars, the profit margins are very tight. So it's one kid, one meal, it's plenty. And that alone is amazing. But if you buy our coffee, literally we'll be able to say on the package, with purchase, 20 children will be fed. It'll be right on the front of the pack. And so people can go in very exciting, very, enthusiastically and say, I want to feed 20 kids today. I'm going to buy this coffee.
Yeah. I mean,
when you see coffee A and coffee B, or snack bar A, snack bar B, well, I'm going to buy snack bar A because it's going to feed a kid, even though snack bar B may be, nutritionally and it may be delicious, but it's not going to feed a kid.
Yeah, the marketing is it's brilliant. It's brilliant marketing. I know that's not your intent. It is brilliant marketing, and I hope and pray that it leads to millions, billions of children being fed and trees being planted, and
all the profits. Yeah, all the profits are for the charity. So I'm not making any personal profit from this. So all of this is Food for Life project. 100% of the profits go to the charities. No individual is owning anything from this.
Yeah, incredible. Well, God bless you for everything you're doing there. That is just amazing. It's interesting, Paul, that sometimes as I go on through these interviews, I'll work through our acronym of HERO, because HERO it is an acronym about honoring your purpose and engaging the audience with your mission and rippling your message to spread positive change and engaging and opening your heart to the world. And I didn't have to work through any of the words, because it's just so obvious and evident in everything that you do. But I do want to ask you one question, and this is a question, there's two questions I always ask everybody. And so I usually ask at the beginning, but I'm going to ask you now as we, kind of come to the end, is you're obviously doing amazing work, right? You have basically all your life, and you have incredible things on the horizon, like we just talked about, like Impact Foods. We see you as a hero doing heroic work and everything. Do you view yourself as a hero?
I actually don't. I just see myself as a servant of humanity. I don't feel I'm anything special, and I feel like I need to do much more. I'm nowhere near being satisfied with what I feel is my capacity. So I'm constantly, pushing on and trying to do more and more and do better and and improve myself. But no, I don't see myself as a hero. I just see myself as a positive person trying to make a positive difference, a humble servant of humanity. And hopefully by the end, I'll feel satisfied and people will be happy that, that I was a person that was here. Because at the end of the day, that's really the way that you measure your success. It's like, was my being alive important? Did it make a difference in someone's life? Like, did I just live for myself, for my own self-aggrandizement, my own self-satisfaction, or did I live for the purpose of making others happy?
Yeah.
And if you live for the purpose of making others happy, 1, 2, 100, 1,000 people, then you've lived your life properly. You've served your purpose in life, whatever that is.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of people, I'm one of those people that, it took me a little bit later in life to create my purpose and realize what I was living for. I mean, I had a family very young and my purpose is, my family has always been a big part of my purpose, but that kind of greater purpose to have more impact, help others. I think in the God's great design is that you found your purpose early for a reason, so you could have as much impact as you're having, and that there's a lot of people that as I've connected with people from all over the world for the past few years, there's a lot of people, I'd say, like the Generation X, my generation, that they don't really start living that purpose until later on in life. And now younger generations, I see, like Generation Z, they're starting to live that purpose early. So they're finding it early. Millennials are probably somewhere in the middle. And so you were outside the norm, I guess, for your generation in that you were living that purpose from a very young age.
I'm actually on the edge of I'm a baby boomer. So I was born in 1963. So baby boomers, it cuts off at 64.
Oh, yeah.
So
great.
I'm certainly different in that sense, that early on in my life, I was living with a purpose. And ultimately, and it's interesting, you pointed out about the Gen Zs and so on. It's actually been identified by a lot of research marketing companies that it's the Gen Zs and millennials, they're actually driving this shift in marketing strategy. Mm-hmm. And this whole concept of cause marketing, becoming a purpose-driven company, that's been driven by the younger generation.
100%.
And there's companies are starting to wake up. Any conscious entrepreneur is starting to realize, okay, if I want to develop a brand with integrity, a successful, long-lasting brand, I have to be a caring brand. I have to, honor the triple bottom line: people, profits, and purpose.
Yep.
And I have to think about these things. I can't just make it about making money. That's just not going to cut it anymore.
Yeah, it is so true. And I've researched that for the past few years, and so much so that I've consulted with many companies on how to do that, how to make impact a part of their business, and put people first and planets and profit last. And large scale companies like PepsiCo, for example, they've been down that path, or Indira Nooyi steering them down that path, and then there's companies that are created on that foundation, like Tom's Shoes, for example. But your companies are shifting in that direction. I think the pandemic accelerated that a little bit. Definitely. In a good way. A good way. And so that will be beneficial, hopefully, for creating impacts and people living in that purpose.
That's one of the good things about that crazy pandemic, which many people believe is a scam. I believe it was a bit of a scam, but it at least shifted people's consciousness and made them think, reevaluate their purpose, reevaluate what was really important in life. Mm-hmm. And that resulted in shifting strategies in business and, focusing on what was really important. So that was a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, it changed my life. I wrote a book that had been in my head for 20 years because I finally realized I had the time to write it during quarantine, and wrote that and created iSpark Change in 2020 and changed that path and, for my life. And so we wouldn't be chatting today if there's a good chance we wouldn't be if that hadn't happened. So I'm very grateful for all of it, in that aspect. So, Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. And I do want to say that, as I said at the beginning, I deemed you as the most impactful social impact hero we've ever had on the program. And I can say unequivocally, you are the most impactful. Just and I know you don't see yourself as a hero, and I totally respect your answer. And oftentimes I'll try to convince the person that they are heroic through our definition, but with you, I don't feel I have to in any way, shape, or form, because I totally respect the answer that you gave. So I do want to ask the final two things that I ask, because to do value to our listeners. One thing I talk about on the show is a spark moment in life, and a spark moment is where there's a single action that either someone impacted your life or you impacted someone's life that has a ripple effect that goes far beyond that initial act. And you don't always see that ripple when it happens, but then later in life, you see that ripple effect. So share an example of a spark moment in your life, some point in your life where it was either someone had an impact on you or you had an impact on someone that literally probably changed their life.
Yeah, many examples of that, but one just comes to mind, and it was a very insignificant moment, but I was with a friend in Australia living on a farm. I was a monk at the time, and I was developing the local Food for Life project, as well as writing an international newsletter to help expand Food for Life around the world. So I became like the voice for Food for Life, because I understood its potential as a transformative organization, that this is amazing power. This can do all sorts of wonderful things in the world, not just fill bellies. So at that particular time, I was training myself in public relations. I was a monk, but I was reading public relations books and teaching myself how to write properly, write articles and press releases and so on. And having this really big sort of visions, but still living on a farm in the remote part of Australia and being sort of very much unfulfilled in that sense. Like my potential was really held back. And this friend of mine, he says, "What are you doing here?" He says, "You should be traveling. You should be, you're in Rwanda now, like heading up a food relief organization. I mean, why are you sitting on a farm here? You're limiting yourself." And he just said it sort of very casually and candidly, and I was like, yeah, okay. And at the time I didn't think about it, but it planted a seed in my heart to think beyond this little limited box that I'd created for myself, thinking that I was going to have a big impact, just living on a little farm. And back then there was no social media, there was no internet, so it was really limited what I could actually achieve from that point. But he planted the seed where then the opportunity came for me to leave Australia, to set up in Washington, D.C., the headquarters. And then I began traveling around the world and lecturing and meeting politicians and presidents. And, I have stories of cooking for presidents and going to war zones and just expanding my horizons and opening up my potential. And it was because of that initial seed that he planted, like making me think, to judge, to second guess myself. What am I going to achieve here? Nothing. I'm going to get a pat on the back and some local endorsements, some local support, but it's not going to make a massive difference in the world. And so that was a very seed moment for me.
That's a beautiful example of a spark moment, and what a spark moment it was. I mean, just with the number of lives that you've impacted. And I believe, Paul, that God helps to choose the right person for the job. And you were definitely the right person, chosen to lead Food for Life Global and to have the impact that you have. So, thank you for all the work you've done. The final thing I want to share is that, our goal at iSpark Change is to positively impact 1 billion people through our future social media platform, our social impact social media platform, the world's first, and through our community and our work, and to make an impact, a large global impact like you're doing every day. And we know we can't do this alone. We know we need the help of leaders like you to show others the way, to show them that they can have a bigger impact than just in their small little area. So I value your thoughts and opinions as a social impact leader. And I want you to peer into the future, peer into our iSpark Change crystal ball. What can the world become if everybody starts believing that they can have a global impact?
Yeah, if everyone actually realized their potential, overnight the world would be transformed. I think we've fallen into this trap where we allow the narrative to be controlled by others, our potential to be controlled by others, like the media, so-called influencers, politicians, the corporate, the corporations and so on, to decide what our potential is. And that's a big mistake. Sometimes we have to turn off, take the time, meditate just like you do, go deep within and realize I'm a spark of God's splendor. I am powerful. And this is the essence of that book that I wrote called The Soul Power, The 5 Noble Truths, because that book is essentially, it was a book I wrote as a therapy for myself. And I wrote it in such a way that it was like, I'm like a friend encouraging another friend to realize their full potential. In other words, when we talk about being positive, having a positive mindset, typically it's done in such a way that it's sort of a little bit artificial. I'm confident. We use affirmations. I'm confident. I'm powerful. I'm rich. I'm this, whatever it is. But if we stop to think about who we really are as a spark of God's splendor, we are qualitatively like God. Mm-hmm. And if we draw from that truth, then when we say things like, I am confident, I am powerful, and you're speaking from the perspective of soul, you really are powerful. You're much more powerful than this physical form. You're much more powerful than what the world is trying to tell you that, what your limits are. You are unlimited. So that was the whole purpose of that book called Soul Power, The 5 Noble Truths, to focus on those 5 truths. Whereas, I am powerful, I am prosperous, I am perfect, there's five P's, I've just forgotten what they are. But the idea is that it's coming from the perspective of soul. So it's not artificial. It's not you trying to trick your mind, but it's really the truth. You really are powerful.
That's great. That's great wisdom to end on. Thank you for that beautiful answer, Paul. I know our audience will appreciate it as much as I do. So I know our audience is going to want to learn more about you. How can they learn more, connect? Where's the best place for them to learn about everything?
Social media, in most of the social media is a Paul Rod Turner on Twitter, on Instagram. PaulRodneyTurner.com is my blog. I haven't been very active there. The social enterprises, 2 social enterprises that I'm working on is kindlyimpact.com and omguarantee.com if you want to learn about, certifying your social good. And finally, Food for Life Global, of course, which is where I spend most of my time, ffl.org or foodforlife.org. And you'll also learn about the impact bars there, which is going to be launching in the next 5 to 6 weeks. It'll be, on Amazon at least, and then eventually in retail stores. So maybe we can talk about that separately.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'll be placing an order the second I can for those impact bars. I'll order some of each just to be fair to start out, and then we'll see. Then hopefully I'll try not to make it flavor dependent. I'll try to make it.
Oh no, they're delicious. They're manufactured by a leading snack bar company called Pure Bliss Organics. They're our friends, and it's a vegan organic snack bar business, and they're out of Atlanta, Georgia. So they're making the bars for us, and they're absolutely delicious. So
perfect.
The taste is not a problem. The most important thing is when you buy that bar, something good's going to happen for someone else.
Yeah, incredible. That's what I said. Greatest marketing ever. Well, Paul, thank you for taking time to share your heart and wisdom with our audience. You came in, you over-delivered as I knew you would. And, I was sharing before the show, your desire to be impactful is evident. I know it's heartfelt. You're filled with passion, humility, and you lead with a heart of service and gratitude, which tells me you're going to continue to have success at Food for Life Global and your other endeavors in all facets of life. So this is only the beginning of your impact. As crazy as that sounds with, the impact you've had, this is only the beginning of your social impact.
And I feel the same way. Thank you so much. I feel the same way because I think Food for Life Global and myself are sort of under the radar. We the work that Food for Life has done over the years is tremendous, but a lot of people still don't know about us. So
Yeah,
with
and we'll do everything we can
opportunities like
to spread the word with the podcast
Yeah.
and with our social media.
Thank you so much for that.
All right. Well, it's been a pleasure, Paul. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
Appreciate it.
All right, Impact Heroes, it's our stories that connect us all. We loved hearing Paul's today. Paul Rodney Turner, you are not only an inspiring and amazing human being, you truly are an iSpark Chain's social impact hero. We'll see you all next time.
Remember, Impact Heroes, every positive action can be a spark moment that has a ripple effect that spreads far beyond the initial act. So go out there and spark change. Don't forget, if you enjoyed this episode, then please smash that 5-star rating on iTunes or Spotify and leave a review. We value your comments and we want to hear from you in the community. Thank you for listening. God bless you, and we'll see you next week on the iSpark Change podcast.